applause to our wonderful band, the Bard, the Time. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening to a wonderful, wonderful occasion for our wonderful club. And what I wanted to do is just take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about the history. Not that we know that much about the history of the club, but we know a little bit, right? We know that it was formed in 1966. We know that it was formed by a group from Hughes Aircraft Company. That's about as much as we know. Until recently. Can we have the next slide? I want you to meet my new best friend. His name is John Bruce. And a few weeks ago, he contacted me out of the blue and asked me about the history of what I knew about the history of Fairwind Yacht Club. And I said, not very much. So he offered to send me some photographs and to tell me a little bit more about the history of Fairwind Yacht Club. Because his father was basically the guy that founded the club in 1966. Now, Bruce lives in Utah, and he would dearly love to have been here today because we've interacted a lot by email over the last few weeks, and he really wanted to be here, and I'm sorry that he can't be, but we're going to send him some material on it, some photographs and so on. Let's have the next slide if we may. This is Bruce in his workshop. Reminds me a little bit of our dear friend Vic Smith, who we lost last year. But he's a big woodwork hobbyist, got it from his father, and he makes little nutcrackers and things, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful guy. So it was purely by chance that he contacted me. His wife says what a lot of our wives say, that he's a junkie, that he doesn't throw things away. And he says she's short-sighted. Because he was looking through some material the other day, and he came across some photographs. Some photographs of his dad and some photographs of Fairwind Yacht Club. So let's go to the next one, and we'll see this is his father. His name is Al Bruce. He was born in 1919, and you can see, I think in this slide, he's about 20 years of age. He became a pretty distinguished individual. Let's have the next slide, and you'll see this is some of the decorations that he was granted. This was when he was a sergeant in the 7th Infantry in Korea in 1945. And the next slide is when he was a member of the Hughes 49ers. Hughes 49ers were the members of the Hughes Aircraft Corporation in 1949. He served with them for 35 years. The next slide is years of service that he gave to the American Legion. So you could see that he was a pretty decorated individual. And the next slide is Al Bruce with the Spruce Goose. He was a significant player in the development of the Spruce Goose with Hughes Aircraft Corp. Bear in mind, he was with them for 35 years. And the company only lasted for 53 years. So he was there. He was a pretty important guy with them. He was on all sorts of executive committees and so on. Let's have a look at the next slide. Next slide is, this is Bruce sailing in Marina del Rey on the 24th of March, 1966, with his dear friends, Cam and Mary Rogers. And the significance of this slide is that we believe that it was when he was sailing with them around about this time that the concept of Fairwind Yacht Club was born. He sailed with these friends every Saturday on their Columbia 24, and they talked about their interest in sailing and how could we make it more accessible for other people to have access to sailboats. And that's when the seed was planted. And Bruce says that his father was the type of person that would make things happen, and certainly did. Let's have a look at the next slide. Here, you can hardly read this, but this is actually this is an extract from our Articles of Incorporation on the 24th of January 1967. And you will see, if you can see it, you have to go down a little bit. But the first name on it is Robert A. Bruce, that is Al Bruce. The second name on it is Oscar Ford, he was the secretary. The third name was Albert Jacobson. The fourth name was Daniel Wright. Next one was Attila Hetherly. And the next one was Mary Ann DeSico. If you go to the next slide, we will see, next slide, is one of the very first board meetings of Fairwind Yacht Club. And Al Bruce is the Commodore, standing up, a very distinguished looking gentleman. On the extreme left of the picture, and you only get half of his face, was the Secretary Oscar Ford. Next to him was Attila Hetherly. The next one is Al Bruce, and then Dan Wright is on the right. He was the first Rear Commodore. How do we know this? Let's go to the next slide. Because Al Bruce was smart enough to write the names of these players on the back of the photograph, and we have the photographs with us today. Let's go to the next slide, where they're presenting some, he's presenting an award, I think, to their race captain. And if you go to the next slide, there's another presentation to one other person. So that's the little bit, there's the few photographs I've got of the history of Fairwind Yacht Club. And in his comments to me, John Bruce said, "Today the club stands on the foundations built by the team my father brought together 50 years ago. The strength of the club today is a result of and a tribute to the strength of that foundation." He said, "I believe my father would be proud to know the organization he created has continued to thrive and grow, and will continue to provide the members as much enjoyment found in sailing as he found." He adds the Hughes Aircraft Corporation. Al Bruce sadly died at the age of 69 in 1988, and at his request his ashes were spread off the Painted Cave, if that means anything to anybody, in Channel Islands Harbour. And I think that says a lot, because we are a club of 2 harbours. We have about 225 members in each harbour, and the fact that Al Bruce, who formed it in Marina del Rey in 1966 with his colleagues, the fact that he loved Channel Islands so much, I think says a lot to why we've developed the wonderful way we have. So that's about as much as I can tell you about the history of Fairwind Yacht Club. What I would like to do now is just to recognize a couple of people. First of all, the person who really was the driver, and I would like to characterize him as the honorary chairman of our party committee. The guy who's been pushing us for a year to put this event together. Would you please give a round of applause to Joe Seligson? Please stand. The next one I want to recognize, we had a little competition to try and determine who was the most patient and long-suffering wife of a member of Fairwind. And the selection committee came to the conclusion that it was a 3-way tie. It's a 3-way tie between Carol Levine. Would Carol Levine please stand up? And Rachel Grasso. Would Rachel Grasso please stand up? Yes, Rachel. And Wendy Winterbank. Would Wendy Winterbank please stand up? 3-way tie. The most patient and long-suffering one. Okay, the next one I want to reference is a special occasion today. Jen Hunsinger and Mike became engaged to be married today. Okay, we had a little award to determine who was the person who had done the most sailing in the last 5 years. Who had sailed the longest distance the most? And funny enough, the winner was my son Jason, who travelled, who skipped on a boat, 57-foot boat, 31,892 miles around the world. And the next one. And we had some problems here on the selection committee because some people wanted to play favourites, and I said I wasn't going to have any of that. So we selected as Miss Fairwind. Miss Fairwind 2016, Antra Jakowicz. Jason's wife, Antra, can you please stand up? Okay, the next one I need your help with, please, because a number of people have asked me, who are the longest serving members of the club? And so I think I need your help. So I want you please to stand up if you've been a member of Fairwind Yacht Club for at least 20 years. That will be since 1996. Will you please stand up? 1, 2, 3, 4. Give you a big hand. Okay, I want you to stay standing. I want you to stay standing if you've been a member for more than 30 years. Otherwise, sit down. Pretty good. Okay. I want you to stay standing if you've been a member for more than 40 years of the 50 years. More than 40 years. Bob, are you a member more than 40 years? More than 40 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 41 years.
No, you're not.
41 years. That would take us back to...
It's beautiful.
40 years will be 1976.
Yes.
You've member since 76?
Yes.
No.
All right. 41 years. 1975. 1974. 1973. 1972.
Bob Abernathy.
You sit down when you're ready. How long have you been a member?
71.
71. Can anybody beat 71? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the longest serving member of the club with 48 years. Bob Anthony. Bob's going to come to the podium and say a few words. Let me tell you, Bob Anthony is a pretty remarkable individual. He has an outstanding career. He's done an amazing amount of work. He's the chairman of the board of directors of the Atlantic Council of the United States. He's a member of the advisory board of the Rand Center of Global Risk and Security. He's a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, of the State Department's Advisory Committee of International Economic Policy. He's vice chairman of the Los Angeles Music Center. He's a director of the William H. Parker Los Angeles Police Foundation. He's a member of the board of Iraqi Refugee Assistance Project and of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship. Please welcome Bob Anthony.
Thank you. I always beware of that use of the word outstanding, because the first time I heard it was when I was in the 6th grade in school, and this beautiful young little lady came up to me and she said, "You know, Bob, you're the most outstanding person in this school." And my heart swelled up. And she followed that with, "I see you outstanding in the halls more than anybody." When I walked in today, I was told that we had 2 port captains, and I thought, well, maybe they were the guys that were assigned to guard the red wine for tonight. Anyway, I want to say that I think we're privileged, we're lucky to have Richard and Scott. They're tremendous individuals, they're hard workers, they're sophisticated sailors, they have big hearts, and they all care for all of us. And I think our success this last several years has been much due to the leadership that they've provided to each and every one of us in our sailing programs. our educational programs, and our safety programs. So I'd like everyone to give them a big round of applause. One of my early experiences with a club was to introduce a friend of mine to the club who hadn't sailed before. He's here with us in this room, Vince Krause. And I introduced Vince to Roy Niebuhr, who is a friend and is a wonderful guy who is dear to the hearts of many of us. And we've enjoyed a friendship, all of us, many of us have, with Roy for many years until he recently passed. And so there was Vince, never been sailing before, went down to the docks with his instructor, Roy. And he looked kind of apprehensive about the boats, never been on a boat before. And he said, Roy, he said, how often do these boats sink? Roy looked at him and said, Vince, usually just once. Then, since Roy was trying to initiate Vince in the club, and you know how back then we had some kind of pledging initiation ceremonies and stuff, but he said to Vince, I want you to run across the street to the hardware store and bring me back 100 foot of shoreline. And I said to Vince, I said, look, as long as you're doing that, why don't you add to the list a can of relative bearing grease? Anyway, I've had a lot of wonderful times with the club. It started out, as a matter of fact, it's a compliment to all of us here in this room to have had this club survive so well for a half a century. That's a long time. And, it really says that what we've got here is the right formula, a wonderful formula, that it works. And I don't know any place else in California, or even the United States, that you can find anything quite as unique and as wonderful as we've got here at Fairwind. You mentioned earlier, Richard, about how we're trying to provide abilities for people to sail that never sailed before, to learn good sailing skills, learn how to do it safely, learn the rules of the road, how to take care of the boats. And we're doing that and forming a community of friends at the same time, and it works. And you guys, Scott and Richard, have led us all this last year. But we got something we should be very, very proud of. It started a little bit before the charter that Richard showed on the screen a few minutes ago. It started as an official sailing club of the Hughes Aircraft Sailing Club. And the members of it originally were all employees of Hughes Aircraft, as Al Bruce was. And it went on for a few months, and some of the people in the club left to go work for other firms, and they wanted to remain in the club. And then several of those people in the club wanted to bring in friends that didn't work for Hughes. So there was a big discussion on what to do about this, because Hughes Aircraft sponsored clubs had a requirement that you had to have just Hughes employees as members. So it was a little negotiation there, and so it kind of morphed, talking to the executives at Hughes, and morphed away from being an officially sponsored Hughes Aircraft Sailing Club into what Richard has just put on the paper, the charter as the Fairwind Yacht Club, has survived all these years. I noticed you put up a picture of the Spruce Goose, and Howard Hughes didn't like that name because there was no spruce in the flying boat. It was all birchwood. And when Hughes died, his estate put that boat up for sale, that aircraft up for sale. There were nobody interested in buying it, so they got the price in half. Still nobody, and half again, and finally, the Rather Corporation bought it for a pittance, with a promise that they would take it up to Seattle and put it on display as a museum. And it went up there. And so I was talking several years later with a friend of mine, and I told him that this guy was the former senior senator from Indiana. And I told him, I said, the Spruce Goose was a big fraud. Yeah. What it really was a great birch pie. Anyway, that's a little bit of the history. We sit here in a harbor that it tried to make into a big shipping harbor in 1887, and the Santa Fe Railroad was behind that, sunk a lot of money in it, and that effort failed. And then they tried again in, I think, 1937, and to make this place into a big harbor, and that failed. And the third attempt was in 1949. The engineers, Army Corps of Engineers, was behind the project, and they got it going. And then Eisenhower put the kebab on it, and it ended. So that's an unsuccessful history for many years. But then we all remember that in 1965, the marina was dedicated. Officially, this marina that we all love so much was dedicated then, and our club was brought together a year later, I guess. So we're part of the base, original founding of what you see all around you is our heritage and our roots. Well, I want to say how proud I am to be a member of this wonderful group, and wish everyone the best of success as you move forward in 2017 with our sailing programs, our races, our education programs, our training, and it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, so much for sharing all of that with us, and thank you so much for being with us. It means a great deal to us to have you with us today. Thank you. I'm now going to ask Bob Crouch to come forward because he wants to make a brief presentation and say a few words.
Me and I determined that we needed something for the 50th anniversary, and we're going to unveil this. Eventually, that's within a week or two, it'll be outside like forever and posted on the wall there, because this represents what we have accomplished in 50 years. Joyce, can you get the plaque? We want to unveil this to you. It was $580.
Whoa. You're not going to get the
well worth it, and it's going to be part of the Windjammer On the top it says full and buy, on underneath, on the bottom it says golden anniversary. Has agreed to mount it just outside the door, so you'll see it all the time in the Windjammers Yacht Club. Now, I don't know if this is the time to say this, but I do want to explain to you that Frank Butler is the icon of boats, like Dave McCoy is the icon of mammoth skiing, in that each one of them are in their 90s now. And Frank Butler has produced over 80,000 boats. And he's now doing it in Florida because the APCD said you can't do them here on Victory Boulevard. The club, before the APCD stepped in, had ordered officially a Catalina 30, which every Thursday we would go over and watch it being built at Catalina Yachts. And I overheard one of the guys over there saying, we got to get rid of these guys, let's get it through those lines. But there were about 8 or 9 Catalina 30s being built at the same time through the production line over in Victory Boulevard. And of course that stopped when the APCD said you cannot build anything larger than 22 feet here in Victory Boulevard. It has to be done elsewhere, and that's when Butler moved all his equipment and everything to Florida. And if you buy a boat any larger than a 22-foot from Catalina Yachts, you purchase it having been made in Florida, and you pay a transport fee to bring it over here.
What? Yeah, good idea.
Any questions?
Wow. Come back.
Okay.
Come back.
We greatly appreciate your kind gift and your generosity, and we will look forward to having it with us for the foreseeable future. That, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the formal part of the occasion. I would like to propose a toast, and then I'm going to hand it back to Bill Wagner and the band. I want to thank again Bill Wagner and his colleagues for doing a wonderful job, and I also want to thank Lauren Alexander for putting together this wonderful slide presentation of all these photographs.